My sister demanded I abort my baby so she could be first. The rest of the family turned on me. What happened next left them in silence. After 7 months of heartbreak, disappointment, and failed attempts, my husband Hugo and I were finally expecting. The joy in the room was palpable. Everyone cheered, except for Serena. Her face twisted with rage as she slammed her wine glass against the countertop. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice sharp with betrayal. "I deserve to be the first." Mom tried to warn her. 19-year-olds aren't ready for a baby, but Serena wouldn't let up. She grabbed her handbag and stormed out, saying that I had better terminate my kid within a week, or she'd call the police. The next morning, she arrived at our door with printed documents from abortion clinics, thrusting them against Hugo's chest while he was still wearing boxers. "I made appointments for her at 3 different places," she informed the entire cul-de-sac. "She just needs to pick one." When Hugo tore up the papers, she summoned the entire family, demanding immediate assistance. That Sunday, 19 relatives jammed into Mom's living room, and Serena stood by the fireplace, as if she were giving a TED talk about how I was wrecking her life by having a baby first. She did have a PowerPoint presentation. Our Uncle Liam, a lawyer, ultimately persuaded her that there is no legal precedent for forcing someone to abort in order to become pregnant. She pointed at me, tears flowing down her cheeks, and said, if I didn't terminate by Monday, she'd never speak to any of us again. We called her bluff, and all 24 of us said, "See you, Felicia." She genuinely departed, sobbing, and we haven't heard from her in a long time. 7 months into my pregnancy, we were at our baby shower when the door flung open. It was Serena. She strolled in with her hand on a large tummy, wearing a tee that read, "First grandchild loading." Everyone fell silent. Mom dropped the cake knife. "Surprise." "I'm almost due," she said, whirling around for everyone to see. "I got pregnant right after that horrible meeting where you all betrayed me. I'm 10 weeks away from giving birth." Everyone thought I was crazy. And when I tried to mess with her and said my due date, which was 8 weeks away, her face became deep crimson with rage. She grabbed my arm and whispered that the dates didn't matter since she'd make sure hers arrived first, then departed before anyone could answer. My mother contacted me on Tuesday, bawling her eyes out. She'd learned from Serena's roommate that Serena had been using black market labor induction chemicals purchased from a Romanian website, putting her baby's life in danger in order to deliver before I arrived. Jacqueline was now in the intensive care unit, but it was not due to the chemicals. Serena discovered a girl on Craigslist whose mother used to be a midwife in the Philippines and paid her to perform a C-section in her living room. The girl continued to refuse, claiming Jacqueline was only 41 weeks. But my sister threatened to do it herself with kitchen knives if I didn't help. They used box cutters that had been sanitized with vodka. Jacqueline had lost so much blood that her neighbor saw it leaking beneath the flat door. The baby made it out alive, but he was purple and hardly breathing. They both almost perished in the ambulance. The infant was admitted to the NICU on a ventilator, and Serena required a thorough hysterectomy. She would never have another child. When she awoke, the first thing she did was call me from her hospital bed. "You did this," she gasped through her oxygen mask. "My baby is dying because you couldn't wait until me to have a child." The most bizarre aspect of all of this was that, now that she was battling for her life, the family was split down the center. One part believed she had lost her mind, while the other thought I should have waited to announce my pregnancy to save her feelings. One aunt even suggested I should have aborted, but everyone agreed on one point. We all had to be there for the ill infant. My own pregnancy was shoved to the side. I didn't mind too much though. My baby was my husband's, not my mother's. It's just terrible that whenever I mentioned something intriguing, the subject was shifted. 4 days before my due date, I was admitted for monitoring. Serena's baby remained in serious condition. The doctor stated that the next 48 hours will determine whether he would live. The scariest aspect was that I could see her through my doorway, standing in the hallway between the NICU and the maternity ward, not looking at the rooms or the nurses that passed by. She was staring squarely at my tummy with a look I had never seen before. "They are going to induce me tomorrow morning. Serena knows the exact time. She's been questioning the nurses about the birth room locations and whether newborns are ever left unattended. The NICU is located 1 floor below maternity. If her kid doesn't make it through the night, I'm not sure what she'll do when mine arrives healthy in the morning." The clock read 4 a.m. I awoke to Hugo's voice in the dark, already on the phone with someone about Serena asking the nurses where newborns are transferred after delivery. He was pacing near the window, detailing how she had been monitoring the halls and tracking how long nurses stayed in each room. The charge nurse on the other end promised to apply a special security code to my chart immediately and notify the entire night shift. Hugo was unsatisfied, his voice rising as he wanted precise names of those who would defend us and what they would do if Serena attempted to approach our kid. His hands shook as he typed names on the hospital notepad, inquired about door locks and panic buttons, and whether security could physically prevent someone from entering our room. Hugo insisted on meeting with hospital security before my induction at 8 a.m., despite the nurse's efforts to calm him down. Within an hour, Leonard Bergman arrived at our door, wearing a security supervisor credentials and carrying a big packet of protocols. He went over every single safety precaution they had, showing us photographs of the electronic badges that tracked everyone's location, and describing how the newborn security tags would activate an automatic lockdown if anyone attempted to remove them or take a baby past particular doorways. Leonard got out his phone and requested that I send him the clearest photo I had of Serena so that he could distribute it to every security guard on each shift, along with instructions to keep an eye out for her. He showed us the dedicated officer assigned to the maternity unit and gave us his phone number, pledging to check on us every hour once labor began. At 5 a.m., someone knocked, and Marissa Hicks from Social Services entered with a clipboard full of documents, stating that she needed to document all of Serena's threats for possible CPS involvement. She sat on the uncomfortable visitor chair, asking specific questions about every encounter, threat, and mention of our kid by Serena, while I felt embarrassed to tell a complete stranger about my family's catastrophe. Marissa outlined the process of obtaining an emergency restraining order and said she could start the paperwork right away if we wanted, and that a judge may issue it before the baby was born. My phone started vibrating non-stop as Mom reportedly informed everyone in the family group chat about the security precautions we requested. Half of my cousins believed I was being dramatic and overreacting to a new mother's worry, while the other half began telling me stories I had never heard before about Serena scaring them or doing something unstable when she didn't get her way. My aunt emailed 3 paragraphs about Serena keying her car after not being invited to a high school party. My cousin also recounted catching Serena digging through her purse at Christmas, seeking for birth control pills to toss away. Uncle Liam sent a private text stating that he knew a detective named Adrian Powell who specialized in these instances and could expedite a police report if we required one. I paused for a moment, concerned about exacerbating the situation and escalating the family feud. But Hugo took my phone from me and wrote, "YSPLEASE" in all caps before I could stop him. A nurse raced into our room, appearing concerned, and informed us that Serena's baby had taken a severe turn overnight, with his oxygen levels dropping so low that they had to boost ventilator support and add more drugs. She stated that the NICU team was doing everything it could, but the next several hours were vital. And despite everything Serena had done, I felt my chest constrict as I imagined that tiny kid struggling to breathe because his mother couldn't wait another 2 months. The morning shift nurse arrived at 7 a.m. She walked us through the entire delivery room layout, showed out on a map where each nurse would be stationed and underlining that newborns were never, ever left alone, even for a second. She showed us the matching ID bracelets we'd all wear, with specific numbers that had to match exactly, or sirens would sound. And she seems truly worried, promising to be in the room with us throughout the birth, no matter how long it took. I took out a piece of paper and scribbled down the names of only 4 individuals who were permitted to visit us: Hugo, Mom, Uncle Liam, and Hugo's mother, before handing it over to Leonard, along with extremely clear instructions that no one else should know what room we were in or whether the baby had been born. Leonard took the list seriously, having me initial next to each name and requesting physical descriptions of each person so his crew could confirm identities before allowing anyone through. Hugo drew me into the bathroom and closed the door, his whole body shivering as he revealed he was frightened he'd freeze up if Serena showed there during delivery, that he'd be unable to defend us when it needed most. He kept saying he should be stronger, that he should be prepared to fight, but all he could think about was how he hadn't seen this coming and stopped it before it got this terrible. We held each other in that tiny hospital washroom, vowing to protect each other and our kid, no matter what occurred. And I could feel his heart pounding against my chest as we both struggled not to cry. The bathroom door opened, and Leonard stood there with his paperwork, alerting us that Serena had just attempted to get through the main security desk using a guest card from yesterday. She informed the guards that she needed to check on her baby, but they recognized her from the photo I had provided them earlier and escorted her back to the NICU waiting area, warning her about restricted access. Leonard claimed she argued with them the entire time, stating she had a right to see me because we were sisters, but they remained firm and told her that one more attempt would result in her complete removal from the hospital. Hugo held my hand tighter as Leonard said that they'd now stationed someone particularly to look for her near all of the maternity hospital doors. I was barely able to grasp what Leonard was saying when Marissa knocked and entered right behind him, carrying a stack of official-looking papers. She perched on the edge of the hospital bed and began filling out statutory reporting papers, explaining that every threat Serena had made against my unborn child would be entered into an official record, triggering an automatic CPS review once the baby came. Her pen went fast across the pages as she asked me for particular dates and times, and I saw her jot down everything from the wineglass incident to the abortion clinic paperwork to yesterday's hallway stare. The documentation was both reassuring and extremely sad because this was occurring. My own sister was identified as a potential threat to my child. Marissa's voice remained calm and professional, but I could see her jaw clench as I explained how Serena grabbed my arm at the baby shower and murmured about making sure hers came first. She made copies of everything and gave me a case number, saying that it would follow Serena even after she left the hospital, creating a paper trail in case anything untoward happened. Mom arrived while Marissa was still present, looking as if she hadn't slept in days, and began crying the moment she saw all of the legal documents scattered across my bed. She kept repeating she was sorry for all of the family pressure and how some relatives were siding with Serena, but she also stated she couldn't pick between her daughters and hoped I understood. I told her she didn't have to decide. She only had to respect my rules and keep Serena away from us. And she nodded, but I could tell in her eyes that she didn't quite comprehend it. She kept staring at the CPS documents, as if they were weapons I was employing against Serena, rather than protection for my daughter. My phone rang, and it was Detective Adrian Powell, Uncle Liam's contact, calling to confirm that he was launching an inquiry into the illegal operation and wanted information about any threats Serena made before or after the home C-section. I put him on speaker so Hugo could hear and began telling him dates and times, while Hugo held my hand because the early contractions had just begun, causing my voice to quiver as I attempted to recall everything. Adrian asked extremely precise questions about who else had heard the threats, whether I had any preserved messages or voicemails, and whether anybody had seen Serena inquire about birth rooms and baby safety. He stated that the unlawful surgery case was solid because they had a confession from the woman who performed it, but that the threats against me would strengthen the entire case and may result in extra charges. A knock interrupted our conversation, and a woman in a suit entered with more documents, introduced herself as the hospital's legal representative, and asked me to sign forms placing an extra privacy lock on my medical chart. She stated that once I signed, no one could validate I was a patient here unless they were on my authorized list. Other hospital staff were unable to provide information about my room number or condition. It seemed insignificant, but knowing Serena couldn't sweet-talk some random nurse into giving her information made me feel more in control. Hugo took a yellow legal paper from his backpack and began writing down everything that had transpired in the previous week, stating he was tired of retelling the entire tale to every new nurse or doctor who came in. He recorded dates, times, and precise statements, creating a timeline that began with the baby announcement and ended with Leonard standing watch and Marissa's documents strewn about. When he was finished, he printed 3 copies on the hospital's printer down the hall, one for my chart folder, one for Leonard, and one in his pocket. The contractions were becoming harder and more frequent, and the nurse came in to check on me, observing the gathering in my room and recommending that we limit visitation to only needed people. Hugo positioned himself beside the door like a bouncer, crossed his arms and standing with his feet separated. And whenever we heard footsteps in the corridor, we both tensed up and turned toward the sound. Leonard had to physically detain Hugo's cousin Travis, who arrived with his phone out, attempting to FaceTime the delivery to share the excitement with the entire family, even poor Serena, as he put it. Hugo's cheeks flushed, and he ordered Travis to leave immediately, or security would remove him. And I was grateful to have married someone who knew that our safety came before family politics. Travis tried to argue that everyone had the right to join in the moment, but Hugo just pointed down the corridor and said, "Leave," and Leonard led Travis to the elevator. Between contractions that made me grip the bed rails, Marissa explained that we were eligible for an immediate restraining order as soon as the baby was born, which would legally prohibit Serena from approaching us or making any contact. Hugo agreed without looking at me, and Marissa began filling out more papers while I attempted to breathe through the pain, which was worsening every few minutes. A different nurse unintentionally entered our room instead of the one next door, triggering the newborn security alarm, an enormously loud shrieking sound that caused everyone to freeze. If that alarm actually went off, the entire floor would go into lockdown in seconds, she stated after apologizing, and she demonstrated how the doors would immediately lock and security would flood the unit. After my first concern over the unexpected noise, I felt encouraged that they took newborn safety seriously and that even an accidental breach would result in such a fast response. Mom texted me that Serena was in the NICU, questioning nurses about their break schedules, when they exchange shifts, and whether babies are ever left alone at such times. The following contraction came so strongly that I couldn't even respond to the message, instead gripping the bed rail while Hugo read it aloud, and his face turned white. He moved into the corridor, and I overheard him speaking with someone. Adrian then strolled in with a small black notebook, which he handed to Hugo. He urged Hugo to write everything down with exact times and dates, in case we needed it as evidence later, and Hugo instantly began scribbling while I fought to breathe through another wave of anguish. The contractions were getting faster now, so the nurse checked me and told me it was time to go to the delivery room. They wheeled me along the corridor, Hugo racing beside, still writing in his notebook, and Leonard strolling ahead of us, examining every doorway. The delivery room was bright and frigid, and they began describing all of the security procedures again, showing us the matching wristbands we'd all wear and the special tag that would be placed on the baby's ankle, which would set off alarms if anyone attempted to take her past specific doors. The anesthesiologist came in to check and modify my epidural while Hugo continued to write, his hand shaking. The doctor arrived, examined me, and said we were ready to begin pushing. And then there were more people in the room, nurses preparing things, and one of them stayed right next to me, as she promised. I pushed and pushed while Hugo held my hand and took a break from writing to count with me and told me I was doing well. Everything hurt, and I was afraid yet determined to bring my baby here safely. And I kept going even when I believed I couldn't anymore. She came out screaming at 7:24 a.m., and they placed her directly on my breast, all wet and warm and perfect, while Hugo began sobbing, and the nurse instantly snapped those security bands on her small ankle and my wrist. For those few minutes, nothing else existed but her little face, Hugo's cries, and the weight of her on my chest. They cleaned her up while she stayed with me and performed all of the necessary inspections without taking her away. Hugo took shots with his phone as tears streamed down his cheeks. Within an hour, they had transferred us to a recovery room at the end of the hall, beyond all of the other rooms and away from the elevators. Leonard joined us to ensure that our names were not publicized anywhere. The door to the room had no nameplate, and Leonard confirmed that the computer system identified us as private patients with restricted information. Hugo drew the nurse aside, and they devised a code word system in which saying pineapple indicated instantly taking the infant to the secured nursery, no questions asked. The head nurse wrote pineapple in red marker on the shift report and showed it to each nurse who arrived on duty. My phone started filling up with messages from family members demanding images and questioning why we hadn't announced anything yet. Hugo grabbed it and typed a message to the group chat, stating that we were taking private time to bond and would not be discussing anything right now. The reactions poured in, with individuals calling us selfish and theatrical. And one cousin claimed we were penalizing the family for Serena's sins. Hugo turned off my phone, placed it in the drawer, and stated that we didn't need to deal with any of that right away. Adrian knocked and came in with his notebook, wanting me to provide a formal statement about all the threats Serena had made, but he kept it brief because I was fatigued, still bleeding, and trying to figure out breastfeeding. He stated that the girl who performed the procedure was questioned by authorities and will undoubtedly face charges for practicing medicine without a license and endangering a kid. He left after about 10 minutes, and Dr. Patel came by to update us on Serena's baby. She stated he was stable on the ventilator but still critical, and that the next day would determine if he had brain damage as a result of being born so early and lacking oxygen during that horrible procedure. I clutched my healthy daughter tighter and felt sick with relief that she was fine, but also terrible for feeling that way when my nephew was battling for his life one level below us. Dr. Patel stated that Serena was continually asking about us, and the psychiatric staff was concerned about her fixation. However, she was too weak to leave her bed, so we were safe for the time being. Hugo's mother texted that she had seen something on social media, and when Hugo checked his phone, he found a post from Serena saying, "I stole her thunder and ruined her life by refusing to wait my turn," and she had tagged every single family member she could think of. The post included photographs of her in a hospital bed, pale and unwell, with captions describing how I had forced her to take drastic measures, and now her baby would die as a result of my selfishness. Hugo instantly took screenshots of everything before she could delete it, and he added them to the folder he'd created with all of our proof. The comments were already pouring in, with some family members defending her and arguing we should have been more considerate, while others warned her she needed urgent treatment. Leonard returned to notify us that someone had been contacting the nurses' station, posing as various family members in order to obtain our room number, but they were unable to provide the security code, so no information was supplied. 20 minutes later, a woman in a suit knocked and identified herself as the hospital's public relations representative, handing a folder containing printouts from Facebook and local news sites. She sat down next to Hugo's mother and began describing how someone leaked information about the unlawful procedure to Channel 7, and now reporters were ringing the hospital for statements. She warned us not to publish anything online or speak with any reporters if they obtained our phone numbers, and she gave us a card with the hospital lawyer's number just in case. Hugo photographed everything she showed us, including a Facebook post from someone claiming to be a nurse here discussing the insane sister who performed her own C-section. The PR lady left after we promised 3 times not to engage in any posts or remarks regarding the situation. Marissa arrived about an hour later, carrying a hefty folder and appearing more serious than I had seen her previously. She moved a chair up to my bed and stated that CPS wanted to initiate an inquiry because of how Serena's kid was born, and they required statements from everyone who was aware of her threats. She kept stating we weren't under investigation and were simply witnesses, but she needed to hear everything Serena had said about taking my baby or injuring herself. I told her about the intervention, the PowerPoint, and how she grabbed my arm during the baby shower, while Hugo added things I had forgotten, such as the exact words she said. Marissa jotted down everything in her notepad and asked if we had any texts or voicemails from Serena, which Hugo promptly checked on his phone. She took images of everything, including social media screenshots, and claimed that this would help safeguard both babies from future situations. Hugo returned from speaking with the nurses regarding guest protocols, appearing angry. He found out that someone had called 7 times in the last 2 hours, claiming to be his mother and attempting to obtain our room number, but they kept failing the security question we'd set up. His real mother was sitting right next to me the entire time, holding our kid, and she looked just as concerned as we did. The charge nurse entered right behind him and announced that everything was being changed immediately, and Leonard would handle it personally. Within an hour, Leonard had returned with a completely new system, including visitor badges that required photo ID, and matching wristbands that changed color every day. He showed us the revised list, in which he would personally verify each guest and designate someone to accompany them to our room, rather than allowing them to wander the halls. He also relocated us to a different room at the end of the hallway, with only one entrance and cameras covering the entire corridor. Hugo's mother helped us pack everything while the baby slept in her bassinet, and we settled into our new surroundings, which felt more like a bunker than a hospital room. Mom arrived the next morning with red eyes and shaky hands. She perched on the edge of my bed and begged if she might bring Serena for just 5 minutes to see the baby, hoping that seeing her would bring Serena back to reality. She kept insisting that it would help the family heal and Serena recognize what she had done wrong. I looked at Hugo, then back at Mom, and informed her that Serena would never get near my daughter after everything she had threatened. Mom began crying harder, accusing me of being cruel and pulling the family apart, but I did not pursue her after she left. I just kept my baby close and concentrated on feeding her while Hugo caressed my back. Adrian called to provide an update. He claimed Damon Cross had given a thorough statement about discovering Serena bleeding on the toilet floor and phoned 911, and the woman who performed the surgery had admitted everything. She informed police that Serena had threatened to hurt herself if she didn't help, and she showed them texts in which Serena stated that she would use kitchen knives if necessary. Adrian stated that the evidence was overwhelming, and that charges would be brought once the prosecutor had evaluated everything, which would most likely be within a week. He also said that Serena may face charges if she is psychologically stable enough to stand trial, which may be months away. Marissa returned that afternoon with a different folder and a nice grin. She said she needed to complete a postpartum mental health assessment with me, which seemed strange because we both knew my stress wasn't normal for a new parent. She questioned me about sleeping, eating, and weeping, and then admitted that what I was going through was far from ordinary. She wanted to connect me with someone who could help. She'd already scheduled a trauma therapist to visit me tomorrow, right here in the hospital room, so I wouldn't have to leave the baby. While she was finishing her notes, my phone rang with a text from my aunt, who advised me to publicly apologize in order to maintain peace and consider family unity. I didn't say anything, but showed Hugo, who snatched my phone and blocked her number while screaming something about people being mad. Leonard came through the door, appearing angry and out of breath. Someone attempted to enter our floor using a visitor sticker stolen from the cardiac unit, but security apprehended them at the elevator when they were unable to answer basic questions about who they were visiting. The person fled before anyone could apprehend them, but we all knew who it was, despite Leonard's refusal to reveal the identity for legal reasons. Hugo stepped up, saying enough was enough, and begged Adrian to return immediately. Hugo had already printed everything before Adrian arrived, including the surveillance footage Leonard had supplied, as well as the screenshots, texts, and threats. They sat at the small table in my room, filling out paperwork for an emergency restraining order, as I nursed the baby and tried not to cry. Adrian stated that the judge would hear our case by video conference tomorrow morning, eliminating the need for me to leave the hospital, and that based on the facts, we would almost certainly receive a temporary injunction. Hugo held my hand as Adrian explained that the order prohibited Serena from approaching us within 600 feet or attempting to contact us in any manner, including through other family members. The door opened, and Dr. Patel strolled in, holding a clipboard and appearing less concerned than before. She pulled up a chair next to my bed and began explaining that Serena's baby was doing better than yesterday, even breathing over the ventilator for a few minutes at a time. The figures on his charts were slowly increasing. And, while it wasn't a miraculous recovery, it was certainly improvement. I pulled my daughter tighter and felt a strange mix of relief and guilt because I'd been praying for that baby, even though his mother tried to harm mine. Hugo squeezed my shoulder as Dr. Patel showed us the charts and pointed out the improving oxygen levels. About an hour later, a female woman knocked and entered with a badge that read, Child Protective Services. She sat down with this huge folder and began asking if we had considered accepting Serena's baby if he lived but couldn't go home with her due to the criminal investigation. My entire body became chilly, and I looked at Hugo, who was already shaking his head. The worker started talking about kinship placement and family preservation, and I felt like I couldn't breathe since I had just given birth the day before, and now they wanted me to care for a poor premature baby whose mother was threatening us. Hugo jumped up and told her firmly but gently that we needed to focus on our own newborn, and that taking on a medically delicate infant while dealing with continuing threats would endanger everyone involved. The worker wrote something down and stated that she understood, but needed to document what she had asked. Hugo uttered what I couldn't say, and I started crying with relief. My phone rang 20 minutes later, and it was Mom, sobbing and begging us to reconsider the kinship placement. She insisted that it was the only way to keep Serena's baby in the family, and possibly assist Serena from losing her mind. I told her there were other relatives who could help, that she had siblings and cousins who weren't only having babies and weren't in danger. Mom said none of them would do it, therefore we were the baby's only option. However, I had to hang up because I couldn't take the guilt trip on top of everything else. About an hour later, Leonard rushed through the door, followed by 2 other security personnel. They held Serena between them, and she was shouting at the top of her lungs about how we had stolen her baby's sole family and purposefully destroyed her life. She'd managed to get past the receptionist and make it all the way to our room before they grabbed her. The other patients in adjoining rooms were scared, peering out their doors, as Serena yelled that we were murderers and robbers. Leonard and the guards dragged her toward the elevator as she kicked and screamed the entire while. I felt terrible that all these other new mothers trying to heal had to cope with such chaos. A psychiatrist arrived within 30 minutes and asked us questions about what had transpired before proceeding to evaluate Serena. He returned 2 hours later and informed us that she was exhibiting symptoms of postpartum psychosis, as well as trauma from her baby's health and the repercussions of her actions. He'd already begun the paperwork for an involuntary psychiatric hold, which meant she'd be sent to the psych hospital and unable to leave until physicians cleared her. The CPS worker returned that afternoon and explained that they were considering all alternatives for the infant, including his father's family, who lived in another state. She explained that we were not her first choice and that she simply needed to prove that she had considered all options. The relief hit me so strongly that I nearly vomited, for I had imagined myself caring for 2 babies while keeping an eye out for Serena. The following morning was our restraining order hearing, and they brought in this entire video setup so I didn't have to leave the room. The judge appeared on the screen and evaluated Adrian's evidence, including security footage and documented threats. He asked a few questions about particular occurrences before issuing a temporary restraining order that would keep Serena at least 600 feet away from us, and prevent any contact efforts for 45 days. He scheduled the complete hearing for 2 months later, when we would have to travel to the actual courthouse. Hugo requested Leonard after the hearing to show him what to do if the newborn security alarm went off. They spent an hour going over the entire simulation, with Leonard showing him the secure places and emergency protocols. Hugo rehearsed repeatedly until he understood exactly where to go and which buttons to press. Watching him take it so seriously and strive so hard to protect us only made me fall in love with him more. That afternoon, I sat with my phone, recording everything that had happened since the beginning. I spoke for about 2 hours, going over each threat and occurrence with precise dates, times, and facts. I recorded the recording in 3 places, including sending it to Uncle Liam and uploading it to a cloud account Hugo created specifically for proof. Having my own record of everything made me feel less helpless and more in charge of our situation. The discharge planner arrived at our door the next morning, with a hefty folder and a frightened expression on her face. She put maps on my bed, showing various routes from the hospital to our house, with specific streets highlighted in yellow. She stated that the yellow ones were the most visible and had the most cameras, in case we required evidence of anything happening. Hugo took pictures of everything with his phone, while she scribbled down the direct number for police dispatch, which bypassed the ordinary 911 operators. She gave us cards with a photo of Serena, and instructions to contact the police if they spotted her around our property. The entire experience felt like we were going into witness protection rather than simply taking our baby home from the hospital. Leonard stopped by while she was still there and put his personal mobile phone number to our emergency contact list. He stated he had previously spoken with the security company that monitors our neighborhood about increasing patrols past our house. Hugo noticed his cousin Travis sitting in a car in the guest parking lot with a large camera 3 days later, when they finally cleared us to leave. Leonard checked the security monitors and confirmed that Travis had been waiting for us for 2 hours. We put everything in bags while Leonard arranged for maintenance to bring a cart through the service passageways. The infant remained nestled against my chest under my jacket as we followed Leonard along deserted passageways I had no idea existed. We passed by the hospital kitchen, where the staff hardly looked up from their prep work. Hugo dragged our suitcases behind us, looking over his shoulder every few paces. The loading dock smelt of old rubbish and diesel smells, but our automobile was already there, engine running. Leonard had moved it himself, using Hugo's keys, so no one would notice us in the ordinary parking garage. We buckled the infant in as Leonard stood guard, then drove out the back exit used by delivery vehicles. Hugo took 3 separate turns to check the mirrors before ultimately driving near our actual area. Travis had no idea we had left and was probably sitting there for another hour, waiting for nothing. Everything at home appeared to be the same, but knowing what we were dealing with made it feel utterly different. When our neighbor's dog barked, I startled and checked the locks again, despite the fact that I had just done so 5 minutes before. When the infant cried, I wondered if someone outside had made a noise that startled her. Hugo sat awake when I eventually fell asleep, sitting by the window with his phone ready to dial 911. We switched places around 4 a.m., when the baby needed feeding, and I took over the watch. During the first few nights, neither of us slept for more than 2 hours at a period. Every automobile that drove by caused us to freeze and listen until it passed. On our 3rd day home, the doorbell rang, and we both worried until we noticed Adrian through the peephole. He entered with a box containing a security camera system purchased with proceeds from a victim fund. He spent 2 hours placing it on our porch and taught us how to monitor the broadcast with our phones. He set it up to cover the entire front yard and sidewalk, so we could record anyone who approached. While working, he took further images of the threatening messages on my phone for the criminal case file. He informed us that the prosecution was taking this seriously and preparing a strong case for when Serena was stable enough to face charges. The next morning, I discovered a cardboard box on our porch that had not been there the night before. The security camera showed Mom leaving it at 5 a.m., when it was still dark. Inside were perfectly washed and folded baby clothing from Serena and I's childhood. Her note stated that she loved us, but wanted time to understand what had transpired. She pledged to respect our boundaries while letting us know she was thinking of us. I cried while holding those tiny garments, remembering when life was simpler and Serena was just my bothersome little sister. That afternoon, my phone called with the hospital number, and my stomach fell, thinking something had happened to Serena, but it was Dr. Patel calling with an update on the baby's health. She stated that baby had started breathing on his own for 15 minutes at a time without the ventilator. His brain scans were better than expected, but they would not know about the delays until he was older. The prognosis had changed from critical to serious but stable, which should have pleased me. Instead, I felt horrible for praying he would stay sick long enough so Serena couldn't use him against us. 4 days later, Hugo's phone called at 2 a.m., with an unfamiliar number. Serena's voicemail was weak and angry, saying we had destroyed her life and stolen her baby's future. She went on for 3 minutes about how we had turned everyone against her and ruined her chances at parenting. Hugo called Adrian right away, even though it was the middle of the night, to report the violation. Adrian claimed she must have used another patient's phone at the psychiatric unit, which was a significant breach. The restraining order hearing was set for that Friday, and the judge appeared on our laptop screen from his courtroom. He went over the stack of evidence Adrian had submitted, which included surveillance footage and voicemail from that week. He asked us some questions regarding specific occurrences and whether we felt our safety was jeopardized. After 20 minutes, he extended the temporary order for a full year, with criminal consequences if breached. He made it clear that any attempt to contact her would result in swift arrest once she was freed from psychiatric care. Hugo had to finish answering the judge's final questions when I started shaking from relief. 2 weeks later, Marissa called to inform us that they had found a home for Serena's baby with his father's parents in Oregon. The grandparents were stable and financially secure, with no criminal record or questionable behaviors. They had already begun the interstate placement process and would take possession once the infant was medically cleared. She confirmed that we had been officially eliminated from consideration as caretakers, which felt like a great weight off my shoulders. I felt bad about being relieved, but I knew we couldn't handle that situation on top of everything else. Hugo organized a video call with the extended family for that Sunday to establish clear boundaries in the future. 23 relatives joined the call, but 1/3 of them had their cameras turned off. Hugo handled the majority of the talking, saying that we'd send a monthly update email, but not respond to individual SMS or calls. He stated that no surprise visits would be permitted, and anyone who exchanged information with Serena would be cut off totally. Most of them agreed, but Aunt Denise insisted that we were being too harsh on someone who was plainly sick. Uncle Liam backed us up, warning everyone that mental illness does not excuse illegal actions or threats. The call ended in an awkward quiet, but at least everyone knew where we were. Mom called 3 days later to inform me she had joined up for therapy at the community mental health center and discovered a support group for families dealing with family suffering from mental illness that meets every Tuesday. She drove herself to the first meeting that same week and sat in a circle with 12 other individuals who understood what it was like to love someone with a different brain function. The therapist provided her worksheets on setting boundaries and spotting enabling behaviors, which she completed rather than putting them in a drawer. She began keeping a journal in which she recorded all of the instances she had excused Serena's behavior throughout the years. Pages and pages of incidents she had dismissed as teenage drama or sibling rivalry. The support group leader emphasized how mental illness can worsen without treatment, and Mom finally stopped blaming herself for failing to solve things with enough love and care. Adrian contacted me on Friday when I was attempting to figure out the breast pump. His voice was matter-of-fact as he told how the unlicensed surgeon had accepted a plea agreement for practicing medicine without a license and endangering children. The woman was sentenced to 5 years in state prison with the chance of parole in 3 years, but Adrian stated that given the gravity of the situation, she would most likely spend the entire term. He stated that Serena would face her own charges after the physicians determined she was mentally competent to stand trial, which might take months or perhaps a year, depending on her treatment progress. The prosecutor was preparing a case for reckless endangerment of a child, and possibly attempted murder if they could prove she was aware of the dangers to her infant. I discovered a new parents group at the library that met on Wednesday mornings, just 8 moms with kids under 6 months old, sitting on yoga mats, discussing everyday topics like diaper rash and whether organic formula was worth the extra money. Nobody knew about my sister, the restraining order, or the baby struggling for his life in the NICU. They simply viewed me as another tired mother trying to figure out this whole parenting thing. We compared notes on swaddling techniques and offered recommendations for pediatricians, and I felt normal for the first time in months. The group leader provided coffee and baked muffins, and we took turns keeping each other's infants when someone wanted to use the restroom or just have a minute to drink their coffee while it was still warm. Hugo received a call from the mental facility informing him that Serena would be transferred to a specialized long-term treatment clinic 2 hours away that concentrated on postpartum psychosis and trauma-related problems. The intake coordinator stated that she would stay there for at least 6 months, probably longer, with no specific discharge date until the treatment team determined she was stable enough for outpatient care. They had tight visiting regulations, and all communication had to go via the clinical team first, so the restraining order would remain in effect even while she was hospitalized. The clinic specialized in instances like hers, where criminal charges were pending alongside mental health treatment, and had strict security standards in place to keep patients from fleeing without permission. Dr. Patel spotted us in the hospital parking lot during our 2-week visit, having just returned from checking on Serena's baby in the step-down nursery. She stated that his brain scans revealed certain areas of concern that would most likely result in developmental delays, but the entire amount would not be known until he was older and had reached milestones. The grandparents from Oregon had arrived and were learning how to manage his feeding tube and monitor his oxygen levels in preparation for taking him home in another month or 2. She handed us a photo they'd wanted her to share. A little baby in a onesie that said "Little Fighter," with tubes and wires attached but eyes wide awake, and he looked precisely like Serena in the newborn pictures Mom had on the mantle. Hugo got down with his laptop that night and set up a family communication system based on a group email that would be sent out once a week with very basic baby updates. There will be no individual texts or phone calls unless there is an emergency. No talking about Serena's position unless it directly threatened our safety. No posting images on social media where she might view them later. He put up an auto-response for any family members who attempted to contact us outside of the weekly email, kindly redirecting them back to the boundaries we had established. The system felt chilly but necessary, allowing us to be new parents without frequent family conflict while still retaining a connection with relatives who had respected our limits. Every morning, I pumped extra milk, and Hugo would transport it to the hospital in a cooler labeled for the NICU donation program, along with the preemie clothes we'd purchased in case our daughter arrived early. The NICU coordinator never questioned who it was for, but I believe she understood and gave us a slight nod of understanding when Hugo dropped the goods down at the desk. We never went to see Serena's kid, but this seemed like the proper amount of assistance, helping an innocent child without placing ourselves in danger. During 2 a.m., when the house was entirely quiet except for the white noise machine, I cradled my daughter against my chest and felt her little heartbeat as she drank. The family drama was not totally resolved, and it probably never would be, but we had erected walls around our small family that felt powerful enough to keep her safe from the insanity. My phone rested silently on the nightstand. No angry texts or guilt-trip voicemails, just serene darkness and the gentle sounds of my baby breathing.